Dan Woike is a national NBA writer for the LA Times, known him for some time, and now the national writer. You are in the hub of it, baby, because the Clippers may lead for Kawhi Leonard, and the Lakers, I think, it's a little bit of a Hail Mary, but I think they land Jimmy Butler, and that's all guesswork. But let's start with Kawhi Leonard, because you're covering the story as much and as well as anybody. Let's just talk Raptors and Clippers, the teams vying for him.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting, Colin, about this free agency is that the two kind of clear suitors have done such a good job in their recruitment this year, right? So let's look at the Clippers and what they needed to do to kind of get Kawhi Leonard.
Okay.
Right? They needed to establish a really good infrastructure. They had to establish stability. They had to stay in Southern California, obviously, is a big part of this too. Yeah. And then they had a really good year. They showcased great young players, feisty in the playoffs. They did a good job, I think, showing Kawhi that they wanted him. As recently as Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, you saw Clippers executives kind of hanging around, and they've done a really good job, I think, on that. And they've made it a place where a credible free agent could go sign and nobody would say anything, right? Nobody would make a fuss about it if he ended up with the Clippers. It would be like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. Toronto, I think, in their sort of one-year addition, they had to show him culture. And they've showed him that is a good basketball culture. And I think most importantly, they had to keep him healthy. And that was what he said in his opening press conference. It was like, I want to be healthy. I want to get to the playoffs and be like kind of optimized. And look at what we've seen. We've seen a historic playoff run.
By the way, the Raptors bit the bullet a little bit on this.
They wore it, yeah.
They didn't love him missing 22 games.
No, and I think part of it helped in the fact that, they played pretty well without him. At times, Pascal Siakam and those guys, I think, did a really good job in the regular season without Kawhi. But in the playoffs, we've seen a different animal in this guy. We've seen him turbocharged, playing 52 minutes, guarding Giannis one night, career high in rebounds in the playoffs the next, career high in assists. This guy has done it all. He's made a real stake at best player in the world. And I think, Colin, if you notice what Masai Ujiri said on the podium after they won it was Saturday, I think. I can't even get my days straight. It's the playoffs. Yeah. That Kawhi Leonard, we believe he's the best player in the world. And I think for Masai that wasn't an accident that he said that out loud. I think on that public stage to declare, Kawhi Leonard, you're the best player in the world, you play here, I think was a message not just for those fans in Toronto, but it was a message for Kawhi Leonard.
Dan Woike joining us, LA Times national NBA writer. This is an interesting thing. Psychology is a factor, obviously. Kawhi was overlooked by Pac-12 schools. Mm-hmm. He was overlooked in the draft. Then he goes to San Antonio, and they are like, hey,
he's a system guy.
Yeah, fit into our system. There is a chip. And by the way, I totally get it, and he has earned every bit of my respect. But Kawhi doesn't have an ego, but man, does he want to be loved.
And I think he wants to be. I think he wants to be respected, and I think every player at that sort of level wants like a shot at that crown, right? Like best in the world. I think that does matter, and being regarded as at the very best at your craft. And he's been able to showcase this in this playoff run. And I think, whereas the Clippers probably felt really, really good about Kawhi Leonard going into the playoffs, and I still think they feel pretty good about it. But they would have to feel less good. He's had moments there in Toronto. A shot that hits the rim 4 times that's in the air for about a week, it feels like. Yeah. That's a moment, right? Standing on the podium with Kyle Lowry, like, that's a moment. I asked Kawhi Leonard a question post-game, sort of like, it's been 5 years since you've been to the finals. Considering everything you've gone through, what's it like to be here now? And he mentioned how Kyle Lowry, was such a good teammate to him this season and kind of helped him get adjusted. And that was a messy situation, right? Yes. They made big kind of changes.
They fired the NBA Coach of the Year.
In the span of 2 months, they fired the NBA Coach of the Year. They hire a coach who spent most of his career coaching in the British Basketball League. and then they trade the most popular, most loyal player they've ever had in DeMar DeRozan, for a guy who could maybe be a one-year rental, who most of the league thought was gone.
This could have been a mess.
Yeah, and they've hit on all of these. Obviously, totally worth it. The risk, sort of the scared money doesn't make money, sort of kind of, that has been what if anything, Masai Ujiri not getting enough credit this year for taking really big swings and coming up big.
Great stuff. You also cover the Lakers. Now, when you say NBA national beat writer LA Times, that always meant you just covered the Lakers and occasionally went to a Clipper game.
We got a lot of people over there, so it's good. I'm able to kind of move around.
I'm going to throw it out here. Mm-hmm. I believe Jimmy Butler is a lot of teams' team's number 2 free agent. I think a lot of teams think like, if we get him, great, but we want Clay, Durant, Kawhi. I think he's the Lakers' number 1. I think they have to position themselves as, listen, you're our guy. He's famously likes L.A. Mm-hmm. If I said to you, all these free agents, who goes to the Lakers? Who's your guess?
I mean, I think Jimmy Butler seems like the safest bet. And it's for a lot of the reasons you just said, is that I think he's a plan B for a lot of teams. You know, when you look at Jimmy Butler, you see things like he's got Tibbs minutes on that body, right? Which is like his clock is ticking. Like, this is a guy who's played a lot of like high intensity basketball.
Hard practice guy.
Should be a better shooter. You wish you would want a better 3-point shooter, I think. You know, the career, I think, is around like 33, 34%. You'd like that number to be a little higher, I think, for a star player. But what you saw in the playoffs, and one of the things that, you know, where I think this is there are a lot of reasons to not like Jimmy Butler. Obviously, the teammate stuff, and you know, the fact this is a guy who's left a lot of places, and teams have been kind of like, see you later.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a concern. But what you saw in the playoffs, and what I think there aren't that many guys who can body up a superstar, chest into a superstar, and go toe-to-toe with someone and play like they're better. There aren't that many guys who can be credible in those situations. Jimmy Butler's one of them. To me, I think he's a pretty good LeBron fit. I could see them poking around at some other guys. I think like Nikola Vucevic is a guy who's a really good player, not a super big star. I think he'd be a good LeBron fit. He's someone that I think is on the Lakers and the Clippers radar. We'll see what that money looks like if you don't want to quite max out a guy. Giving Jimmy Butler a 4-year max is a scary proposition.
Well,
that contract's going to look pretty bad at the end of it, but their clock's ticking over there, and they kind of got to go. And that's where I agree with you. They're in this. The Lakers, I think, are in this weird situation where they've got 2 different masters that they're trying to serve. You have LeBron James, you know, an all-time great NBA player, maybe the best ever, tremendous winner. This is a guy who lives in the NBA Finals. His whole year is built towards getting to the NBA Finals, right? And then you've got a team, by and large, the rest of your core are guys that are 22, 23 years old who are learning every day, who are trying to go through mistakes and play through those things. I think this was a really big challenge for Luke Walton. It's going to be a huge challenge for Frank Vogel, is how do you coach a team that's trying to do 2 different things? You're trying to develop a young core, you're trying to win now with the all-time great player who's at the end of his prime. To me, I still think the best path forwards for the Lakers is a trade, whether it's Anthony Davis, whether it's Bradley Beal, whether it's whoever else hits the market. There's going to be 2 or 3 names that aren't on the market now that will be, that we don't know yet, just the way things shake out. They need to turn some of those young guys, they need to get a more simplified plan, I think, and move in a clearer direction instead of trying to do everything.
Yeah, this is the Lakers' current flow power org chart. We wrote this down next. Instead of a success pyramid, it's a spider web that can't find its way.
John Wooden would not be happy with this.
No, John Wooden would be like, oh, wait, time out. This is not going to work. All right, Dan Woike, LA Times sports reporter. He's the national NBA writer for the LA Times, a newspaper in America, by the way, that's hiring people. It's hiring dozens of people. Dan, great seeing you. Hour 3 next. We're absolutely packed on a wonderful Memorial Day Monday in LA. It's The Herd.